The Galactic Custodians prided themselves on maintaining order across the stars. When a routine patrol intercepted a small human vessel drifting too close to a restricted system, they followed protocol. The crew, 5 juvenile humans, were promptly detained and transferred to the nearest galactic holding station. Commander, a seasoned enforcer of interstellar law, viewed humans as unpredictable but relatively harmless. He assumed that detaining the younglings would be a simple matter. After all, every species understood authority, discipline, and the consequences of defying the custodians. What he didn't anticipate, however, was that human children were unlike any other species in the galaxy. The custodians had captured hardened criminals, rogue bounty hunters, and even a telepathic warlord whose mind could bend reality. Yet as Commander reviewed the security footage of the human juveniles sitting in their containment cell, a strange feeling crept over him. Unease. They did not appear frightened. If anything, they looked entertained. One child was rhythmically tapping on the meta bench, another was balancing on their hands against the wall, and 2 were whispering and giggling in a way that suggested some form of impending catastrophe. Narrowed his eyes. Activate the surveillance drones. I want full monitoring of their actions. The custodian guards who had escorted the younglings to their cell returned to the command center looking shaken. Sir, they asked us very unusual questions, one officer reported. Questions? What kind of questions? Asked. They wanted to know how the ventilation system works, where we keep our snacks, and if we have ever played something called hide and seek, the officer said grimly. Mandibles clicked together in irritation. They are confined in an containment cell. What could they possibly do? He waved off the officers, but a deep sense of unease lingered. Something was off. An hour later, alarms blared through the station. Containment breach. Security lockdown activated. Nearly toppled from his command chair. What? How? He turned toward the monitor, and what he saw sent a pulse of disbelief through his sensory nodes. The holding cell was empty. The security cameras inside had been disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. The feed had been carefully looped to show the juveniles still inside while in reality, they had vanished. Find them. Now. Barked, sending custodian teams scrambling through the station. Meanwhile, deep within the storage deck, the 5 human children were raiding the custodian pantry. They had somehow navigated the ship's corridors and overridden security protocols to gain access to what they had determined was the most valuable room on board, the snack storage. I told you it would be in here, one of the kids said, stuffing their pockets with bright, glowing ration cubes. This is way better than the food dispensers back home. Another child was inspecting an emergency medical kit. I think I can make slime with this, they mused, twisting open a canister of decontamination gel. A third child, the leader of their group, grinned. All right, let's split up. We've got a whole station to explore. Back at the command center, chaos reigned. Reports came flooding in. Sir, the juveniles have hijacked the environmental controls. They are altering gravity levels in random sections of the station. Commander, they have accessed the power system and are broadcasting what I believe is dance music to all floors. We have a situation. The containment wardens have been lured into a game. They are chasing the younglings, but they seem to be intentionally leading them in circles. The commander could barely process what he was hearing. This was not an escape attempt. This was psychological warfare. With a deep breath, straightened his uniform and activated the intercom. Human juveniles, this is Commander. Cease your activities immediately and return to your designated containment area. There was a long pause before a voice responded, one of the younglings. Come and get us, followed by peals of laughter before the transmission cut off. Sagged in his chair. This was going to be a long, long night. The holding cell was designed to contain the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. It had neutralizing energy fields, reinforced walls, and a complete lockdown system that had never failed. Until now. Within an hour of their confinement, the human juveniles had disassembled the security cameras, reprogrammed the automated food dispensers to produce only snacks, and somehow convinced the guards to engage in a game called tag, which resulted in 3 custodian officers being sent to medical treatment for exhaustion. Commander watched in horror as the cell that had held war criminals and telepathic assassins was turned into a chaotic playground. "How is this possible?" he muttered, clutching his head appendages. "They are tiny. They should be manageable." But there was no managing them. There was only survival. The custodian guards had been trained to subdue all kinds of prisoners, warriors, creatures that exuded paralytic toxins. Yet none of their training had prepared them for this. When officer tried to confiscate a small device one of the juveniles had built out of scrap parts, only for the child to look up at him with wide, teary eyes and ask, "Why do you hate happiness?" The officer froze. He had faced down death, but this was worse. He handed the device back. The child grinned and skipped away. Reports of the situation reached the officers across the station. "Commander, they have barricaded themselves in the mess hall," when officer reported, his voice on the edge of hysteria. "What do you mean, barricaded?" snapped. "How did they acquire materials?" "Furniture and kitchen trays," the officer admitted. "And they have constructed what appears to be a slingshot cannon. They are launching fruit at anyone who approaches." Rubbed his temples, a deep sense of dread washing over him. "And what of the security protocols? The energy fields?" "They found a way to redirect the power. They somehow overloaded the circuits using juice boxes." The station's personnel, once confident in their ability to control any situation, were now cowering behind makeshift barricades, dodging flying fruit projectors. The juvenile humans had claimed the mess hall as their kingdom, and they ruled it with an iron grip of chaos. When an officer attempted to negotiate, he was met with demands for more dessert rations and access to the control room so they could play with the buttons. Negotiations failed immediately when the officer refused, and the younglings retaliated by setting off the fire suppression system, soaking the entire deck in sticky foam. "Commander," the officer reported, his voice hollow, "I fear we are losing." Desperate, made his way toward the mess hall himself. He had to see the situation with his own eyes. As he approached, he found 2 of his best guards sitting on the floor, wrapped in what appeared to be streamers. "What happened to you?" he asked aghast. One of the guards barely lifted his head. "They challenged us to something called musical chairs. We thought it was harmless." His voice cracked. "We were wrong." Another officer, shaking, whispered, "They don't tire. They just keep going." "Commander, I think they've discovered our weakness. We are structured, logical beings. We thrive on order. They thrive on chaos." Took a deep breath and stepped into the mess hall, prepared to make one final attempt at diplomacy. The younglings spotted him immediately. "The boss alien is here," one of them called, and the rest turned their attention toward him, eyes filled with mischievous glee. "Listen to me, humans," began. "This is a detention facility, not a playground. You are prisoners, not, oh big scary alien wants to tuck," one of the kids interrupted, giggling. Another walked up to him and poked his arm. "Why are you all so grumpy? You need a nap." Inhaled sharply. "Enough. I am here too. Can we have more pudding?" Another child interrupted. "What? No. This is not a negotiation." "Detained." The younglings huddled together, whispering. Then their leader, with boundless energy, grinned. "Okay, but if we win at capture the flag, we get extra dessert." Stared at them, exasperated. He had commanded entire battalions, faced down enemies that would send most beings into madness, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Fine," he muttered, resigning himself to his fate. "We will play your game." And so the mightiest enforcers of intergalactic law found themselves running through the halls, dodging foam projectors and slipping on pudding as they tried to win a battle they had already lost the moment they detained the human juveniles. In the end, it was not force or authority that determined the victor. It was energy, relentless enthusiasm, and an utter disregard for order. Set against the wall, exhausted beyond reason, watching as the younglings cheered their victory, He had learned a lesson that they, human children, were not to be detained. Ever. And if they were, then should be prepared for absolute and relenting chaos. As word spread through the station, more custodian officers arrived to assess the situation. Some observed from a distance, fascinated by the absurdity unfolding in their supposedly secure facility. Others attempted to assert control, only to be roped into what the young humans called a talent show. One officer found himself juggling confiscated contraband. Another was reluctantly performing what the humans insisted was breakdancing. When a custodian guard asked why they were behaving this way, one of the human juveniles grinned. Because we're bored. And when we're bored, we get creative. Realized too late that this was not a detention, this was an invasion. An invasion of chaos, noise, and unchecked energy. He was no longer their captor. He was their reluctant host. Desperation set in among the custodians. The holding facility, once a place of strict order, had transformed into a festival of madness. The juveniles had hijacked the station's announcement system, broadcasting what they called karaoke hour to all floors. Officers trying to reclaim control found themselves caught in dense battles, unable to comprehend how they had been outmaneuvered so thoroughly by creatures barely half their size. Sir, an exhausted lieutenant reported too. One of them is teaching the security drones how to moonwalk. We don't even know what that means, but the drones are participating. Rubbed his temples, his dignity crumbling with every passing second. He was a commandant, a keeper of the galaxy's peace, not a babysitter for chaos incarnate. Enough of this, he bellowed, storming into the containment area. The children turned toward him, pausing their impromptu talent showcase. This station is not a recreational facility. It is a secure environment for maintaining order. The human juveniles looked at him with wide eyes. Then their leader, a small child with an unsettling amount of authority among the others, stepped forward. But we're just having fun. You guys seem really stressed. Maybe you need a break too. Clenched his mandibles, barely containing his frustration. You do not understand the severity of this situation. We are the Galactic Custodians. We are not here for musical performances. One of the children tilted their head. Then why are you watching? Froze. He had in fact been watching. As had several other custodians, their stern expressions betraying hints of curiosity. We were merely assessing the extent of your. He trailed off as a custodian officer, unable to resist, clapped as one of the children did an elaborate spinning move. Groaned. Enough. We must restore order. The children exchanged glances before huddling together. Whispering, plotting. Had seen better strategies unfold before, had outmaneuvered entire fleets, but he had never faced an enemy so unpredictable. Finally, the leader turned back to him. Okay, how about this? We'll stop messing around if you guys play one last game with us. Hesitated. It was a trap. He knew it. And yet they had left him no other option. Fine. One game. And then you return to your cell. The younglings cheered. Great. It's called Capture the Flag. Barely had time to register the name before the children scattered, dashing through the facility at speeds no custodian officer could match. Chaos erupted once more as the entire force of trained officers found themselves unwitting participants in an elaborate game of strategy, evasion, and mischief. Every attempt to corner the children failed spectacularly, as they anticipated every move, weaving through security checkpoints, outmaneuvering patrols, and using the station's own systems against them. 2 hours later, slumped against the wall of the control room, utterly defeated. Officers around him lay sprawled on the floor, drained of energy, their dignity in tatters. The younglings, victorious, cheered each other. Okay, their leader said, we'll go back to our cell now. But that was fun. We should do it again sometime. Didn't even have the strength to respond. He simply waved them off, defeated in a way he never thought possible. As the juveniles were escorted back, one of the officers leaned toward. Commander, he said, was weak. We need new protocols. We were not trained for this level of psychological warfare. Nodded slowly, staring blankly ahead. No more human juveniles. Ever. The officers around him murmured their agreement. Some things they now knew were too powerful to contain. By the time the human parents arrived, a formidable woman with arms crossed and an expression that made even feel nervous, the station was in complete disarray. The Galactic Holding Station, known for maintaining order and security, now resembled a battlefield after an unwinnable war. Custodian officers, some wrapped in security blankets, others leaning exhaustedly against walls, sat in defeated silence. Streamers hung from control panels, the security drones now functioned solely as automated disco balls, and the containment area smelled of an unholy mix of alien fruit, sugar, and something the officers simply labeled chaos residue. Weary beyond words, forced himself to stand as the human woman approached. "What have you done to my children?" she demanded, eyes narrowing. Mandibles clicked nervously. "Madam, I assure you we have done nothing to them. If anything, they have done something to us." He gestured weakly toward his officers. Van was staring blankly at a wall, whispering the words, "Never again," while another was slowly attempting to entangle himself from what looked like a makeshift net made of confiscated security belts. Your younglings have exhibited a level of, shall we say, disruption, that we were entirely unprepared for. The mother gave her children a single look, and something incredible happened. The chaos stopped. Immediately. The younglings who had been spinning an unfortunate custodian officer in a chair froze. The van trying to rewire the station's lighting system put the panel back. Even the child in the middle of constructing a fort out of confiscated supplies stood at attention. Felt something he had not in the entire past hours. "Hope. Explain yourselves," their mother said, arms crossed. The leader of the younglings stepped forward, looking thoroughly chastised. "We were just having fun." The mother's expression did not change. "Fun? You turned a intergalactic detention facility into a daycare riot." One of the younger children piped up. "We got bored. They wouldn't let us do anything, so we had to make our own entertainment." The mother sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "What did I tell you about creative problem solving in enclosed spaces?" "Only when necessary," the children recited in unison. "And was it necessary here?" she continued, was dangerously calm. The children looked at one another, then slowly shook their heads. "No, ma'am." Had faced war criminals, and creatures that could end entire civilizations with a thought, but never had he seen something as fearsome as this human mother disciplining her offspring. The younglings stood perfectly still, responding to her words with a precision that no amount of custodian training could have instilled in them. He almost pitied them. Almost. The mother turned back too, her expression softening slightly. "I apologize for any inconvenience they may have caused." Blinked. Inconvenience? His station was in shambles, his officers were traumatized, and he was fairly certain they would have to rewrite half their security protocols to prevent something like this from ever happening again. And yet, despite all of that, he found himself nodding. "Accepted," he said, because what else could he say? "We'll be taking them off your hands now," the mother said, motioning for her children to line up. They obeyed instantly, marching in an orderly fashion toward the exit. Marveled at how effortlessly she controlled them, a feat not even his officers could achieve. Before she left, she turned back to him. "You know, they really weren't trying to be a problem. They just don't do well with inactivity." Who had spent the last hours experiencing firsthand the consequences of human juveniles left to their own devices, nodded emphatically. "Yes. That has been made abundantly clear." The mother gave him a small, knowing smile before leading her children away. The officers, still capable of standing, saluted as she passed, their expressions filled with something between admiration and sheer relief. When the doors finally closed, sealing away the human family, silence fell over the station. Exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding and slumped into his chair. Across the control room, his officers were slowly beginning to recover, some sitting in stunned disbelief, others muttering about early retirement. "Commandant," one of them asked hesitantly. "What should we do about the mess?" Stared at the chaos around him, the streamers, the alien snacks, the security drones still lazily spinning in circles. He closed his eyes and made a decision that he knew would be enshrined in custodian policy for generations to come. "We issue an intergalactic directive. Effective immediately, no custodian facility shall ever detain human juveniles under any circumstances. Ever." His officers nodded solemnly. They had all learned a hard lesson that day, when that would be passed down through the ranks of the Galactic Custodians for years to come. If there was one universal truth they could all agree on, it was this: never detain human children. The galaxy simply wasn't ready for that kind of chaos.